question to the last speaker. You seem to have a mission to be disruptive to existing operators,
Right.
which puts a regulator in a tricky position, because on the one hand, we would have sold spectrum based on a certain model, and then you have people saying make the unlicensed, make a certain, the white space and unlicensed spectrum for innovation. So, question to you and to the rest of the panel: how do you manage this disruption without causing economic chaos?
Well, if you look at my background, I'm holding 2 PhDs, of course, all in the mathematics. I'm also the technologist and an engineer in my past 30 years. So to me, I'm just a designer and an innovator. I don't care who will use it. I don't care. I just building guns, right? I have no power to convince, your policy makers and decision makers, but I have power to innovate something, to build something, whether you like it, you want to use it. I mean, spectrum sharing is either licensed or unlicensed. That's why I'm opening design a Wi-Fi will operate all the frequencies up to 6 gigahertz. It's up to you. You own the spectrum. You decide, hey, this technology is fun. I just open up and I just software tune to my radio and you use it.
Okay, that's a tough act to follow. As a Wi-Fi vendor, I would say that when we look at TV white space, we're looking mostly at opportunities that are unserved, specifically unserved by anyone else. So we understand there's a risk to the business model. We understand those pressures, but we've got customers all over the world that can't deploy because there's no backhaul. And especially, we've seen the triangle a few times with the top 7th and the various billions and how much they can afford to spend. We've got a network in Africa. It's actually a free community network that's expanded, but over 500,000 people are getting connected for the first time from that. And they're expanding it, and they think they can go forward with the business model of $1 or $2 per month ARPU per subscriber. But they can't grow because there's no backhaul to the communities they want to get to. So risks are acknowledged, but I think there's a huge opportunity where you don't have to interrupt anyone. And the 3.5 gigahertz example, that would also not interfere. The macro licenses are out there. They're not penetrating buildings. The mobile operators don't want to deploy in a hospital. It's a terrible business model. It's so expensive, there's not much usage, but you want good connectivity there. So dynamic spectrum gives you a way to address that.
Do you want a response? Go ahead. Just a quick response. If we're using only white space and we're being disruptive, we're doing our job.
Well, I don't have a double PhD and I don't have a crystal ball, so I can't give you a definitive answer. But what I can certainly tell you is I think the coexistence is the way to go forward. We are not looking at unlicensed and disruption to necessarily completely replace the need for license. There would always be a case for that, and there would always be a need to balance the two. What we're obviously hearing since yesterday is the need for more of a shared approach to how you use the spectrum. And I think that certainly will be disruptive in some ways, but it also be very productive because it will change the way people consume an asset that is, a public asset, but hasn't been effectively used so far.
Just to very quickly, at one point, I'm just going back to what Robert was saying, the printing press was invented, and suddenly all of the monks illuminating manuscripts suddenly had a lot less work to do. But more time to drink and make beer, which is what monks are good at as well. But importantly, I think, certainly when I was a regulator, our responsibility was how do we maximize the economic and social benefit to the citizens of our country. We've seen that broadband is inaccessible at the moment to a vast number of people around the world in all of our countries, and while this may cause some realignment, it won't replace mobile operators. It may dampen their further growth. It may, there are new equilibrium we've reached, but the end result will be more people connected, able to use the internet to improve their education, start businesses, access government services. And the regulators that do promote this will be heroes in their country, I think, rather than villains. They may not get invited to parties by some of the mobile operators, but still, a balance will be reached, and that's the uncertain nature of technology. But coexistence, I think, is the key, and then equilibrium, and we will reach a new equilibrium.
Okay, so another question from the audience, perhaps? Okay, so one of the things that we hear a lot about is just this sort of notion of quality of service, and that different types of spectrum access regimes necessarily mean one thing or the other in terms of quality of service, and you use Wi-Fi, it's going to be different than if you use LTE, and go down the list. So I just want to get some thoughts from the panelists around this whole issue of quality of service and sort of how that sort of plays into the whole spectrum sharing issue.
I'll do a quick one. So it's not necessarily the case that if a system is governed by rules, that rather than exclusive use, that the quality of service will be any less. So I talked a little bit earlier about the roads system. That can become congested. We see that happening in lots of cities. But there are people like DHL, there are people like other carriers who still guarantee that they will get your packet within 24 hours from one place to another, using a license, a shared network. And maybe they could do it quicker if you were to auction off a time slot on the road system just for DHL, but it would cost a lot more for you to deliver your packages.
I would just like to comment that as Wi-Fi evolves, the quality of service evolves as well. So if you think about the evolution of Wi-Fi, you went from a technology that was largely taking advantage of what we call junk spectrum, the junk bands, and now it's evolved where you're actually providing priority to certain packets over others. So you're able to get real-time service like voice and video over Wi-Fi. And so as Wi-Fi evolves, I expect that the quality of service will continue to evolve.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that, and by and large, I think Wi-Fi has been a very good test technology in a way for us to deal with this issue of quality. It was simply a LAN replacement technology. As we all know, it wasn't meant to be a public access. Over the last 10 years, I think industry has done a phenomenal work in looking at not just the issues which are technical, but there are issues which are in terms of how you even structure certain way of working on the common shared infrastructure and things like that. So there's, I think, phenomenal body of learning available, which can be applied as we go forward with more of these technologies in future.
I'm just a bit, Shrikant, just to follow up, because I know you have a lot of carrier members, right? So I mean, just what are the sorts of comments that they would make around this issue? I mean, a lot of cable operators are using Wi-Fi, for example, or they're your members, or some of the even mobile operators. So I'm just curious, what's sort of some of the, if you can reflect on some of the feedback you get on this issue.
Yeah, and we get that all the time, and I think what I've seen clearly is it has been driven mostly by the user expectations, because in the past, Wi-Fi wasn't necessarily expected to behave with a certain assured quality. People could live with it, people accepted it the way it was. But progressively, what we have seen is consumers tend to expect a certain quality, and the industry has stepped up to then deliver that quality of service. And the carriers are now trying to work together on those sort of issues in a variety of ways to make sure it does support this quality. It doesn't matter whether you're a cable carrier or a cellular carrier. Ultimately, in the past, data was treated differently than voice. Now it has all become one. So things like quality of service in the context of voice has a slightly different connotation than what it has in the traditional just surfing or using internet for that matter. And what we have seen is a greater attention to detail, a more granularity, especially with things like Wi-Fi calling, for example. The paradigm has, again, not exactly changed, but it has evolved to look at quality, not just in terms of, like I said, how the data surfing or internet access is supported. Can we mirror the quality that people expect on our traditional telco voice-grade service? And what does it take to do that? What does it take to do that, not just in a domestic environment, when you're roaming onto other partner environment? And especially, again, if your roaming partner environment is also Wi-Fi. So how does it work? So again, with that in mind, there's a greater attention being paid to, first of all, defining what quality parameters are, what needs to be implemented by the service providers, how you track and monitor it, and then how do you make sure it is supported across different layers and different services. So there's a body of work that's going on.